Hey everyone, it's Josh Andrew here. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Conversations with Josh Andrew. We're all about leadership, having meaningful conversations, and getting just a little bit better every day. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. Your support helps us reach more people and continue bringing your great content. Thanks for listening, and let's keep the conversation going. Let's get into this week's episode. Well, hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of Conversations. I'm so excited to jump into this week's topic of culture. I think one of the greatest things that we can do as leaders is facilitate a healthy environment where culture is defined, culture is developed, and really this idea of culture, I believe, is talked about a lot, but not a lot of times there is practical recommendations or practical advice. I've really enjoyed making episodes of Conversations. This last Sunday, my wife and I were part of our launch Sunday. We're part of a great church in Phoenix, Arizona called Valley Church. We get to lead the operations of the church. And over the last 10 years of my life, I've really dedicated to building the local church. I believe the local church is the hope of the world. I believe there is nothing like the local church. Going to Sunday, going to service, getting a hug from somebody, seeing somebody that you love, hearing a great message from the Bible, and obviously incredible worship, kids ministry, all of it. It is literally why I believe my wife and I literally exist, to worship God and also build the church. So I'm going to give you 6 recommendations or really thoughts around this concept of culture. Again, culture a lot of times is like a buzzword in church. It's a buzzword in even leadership in general. So for me, I want to give you 6 real specific things that I believe will drastically alter your culture for the better. And again, I believe culture and values and all of that stuff is really the lead pastor's responsibility to envision, but then also the leadership team to also take that and apply it and help it simple. The best leaders I know are the leaders who can make something complex really concise and easy to understand. So culture multiplies momentum, okay? We're going to build it everywhere, but it has to be together. So culture creates momentum, and the key is to building a thriving kingdom culture that can be replicated anywhere. It's not just about one person. So I'm trying to say here, it's not about one person, it's about the kingdom. We're building the kingdom. So regardless of your local cultural context, because by the way, everything has a culture. Chick-fil-A has a culture. Your city has a culture. It has a flavor. All of those are sub flavors or sub brand anyways to the reality is we're building a kingdom. We have one king, and his name is Jesus. Your pastor is not the king. I'm not the king. The leader's not the king. The biggest giver in your church is not the king. It's not about one person. The vision must be shared quickly and clearly to create a collective understanding. Like I said, culture multiplies momentum. And I've heard it said often, and I think I agree with this. Every time you hear the word momentum in church, what if that's actually what's killing your momentum? Because we're just trying to manufacture it. We're just trying to get something going when the reality is it's probably not in your culture. And by the way, a lot of times people have a hint of your culture. They don't have the heart of your culture. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But like I said, culture creates momentum. And the key to building a kingdom here is understanding who's on the throne. That is Jesus. And it's just not about one person, which means you can't have 2 kings in one castle. We have one king, everybody else is servants to that king, including the pastor. But again, the reality is, how do we make sure this gets assimilated down through your teams? Because a lot of times, it's going to take 3 to 5 years for your culture to really be in everybody's tongue and everybody's language and everybody's spirit. But as we think about the kingdom culture, as we think about the local church, we got to think local, but also kingdom. So again, local says, how would this message be heard and received in the city I live in? I think Jesus was the best person at this, by the way. Every audience he was in, he spoke with different language, different terms, different stories, because he understood his audience. So again, culture multiplies momentum. We got to have a great culture. We got to know who we are and who we're not, because it is about the collective might of the local church. So culture creates momentum. You got to build it everywhere together. No matter what city you live in, no matter what city you move to, it's the same kingdom. The style in which they do church might look different, but the message of Jesus remains the same. Number 2, teach the why consistently. It's the key to lasting culture. What's funny is we get really bored with the same things. I understand that. I was just talking to friends at dinner last night about how I'm a robot. I do the same thing every single day, same routine, same systems. I really am a person of habit. With that being said, I can never get bored or I can never get familiar with our why. And this takes time, by the way. This takes real effort from your end to be able to simply articulate why. And not the big stuff, by the way. Yes, the big stuff and the little stuff. Why do we want chairs straight? Why do we want to start service on time? Why do we care if the pipe and drape looks good? Explaining those specific whys will help us all get on the same page and understand that without the right why, our fight dies. I would really, really recommend you having a culture night, team night, DNA night, whatever you want to call it, every single week for the first year of your church plant. And then obviously before launch as well, have a DNA night. And again, they're essential because if you don't explain and articulate practically the why behind what we're going to be doing and defining things, what's going to end up happening is people are going to have room to make their own thoughts and opinions about the culture. And just so we're clear here, you don't actually get permission to alter or shift culture because that is not unifying. There is no unity and everybody has their own thought or opinion or advice or recommendations towards the thing. We got to have one mission, we got to have one vision, and we got to have one purpose, and all of that helps shape our culture. Like I said, these DNA nights are absolutely essential. One, obviously, just for connection and fun, but also teaching on culture and creating space for Q&A. I think Q&A is something that we miss in the church sometimes when we're leading teams or people. Just give people the opportunity to ask questions. You give people the opportunity to ask questions, what's going to end up happening is, yes, there's going to be some really bad questions, really awkward environments, but also just what you're doing is you're publicly creating space for people to have an opinion. But that doesn't mean that their opinion is instantly applied. What you're doing is you're just creating space for people to articulate what they're thinking and for you to be able to give words to what they're thinking about. So, hey, Pastor, I had a question. Why don't we do altar calls? I think we should really do those. Hey, yes, I love that so much. Blank, give the context. So again, teach the why and never get bored with the why. The reason why you get bored with the why is you assume people get it. And what you're finding out by the fruit is, again, they have a hint of your culture. They don't have the heart of your culture. They have the heart of your culture when they can share the values, when they can communicate and finish the sentence you were going to say. And most of the time, by the way, culture, yes, is communication. It's language. It's how we distinct cultures around the world. And when we can drastically understand who we are, but also who we're not, and we can articulate that in a very, very simple way, what's going to end up happening is you're going to attract people that you're supposed to attract, and you're also going to repel people that you're not supposed to have. That doesn't mean that they're not called. That does not mean that they're not bad leaders or good leaders. What that means is that they're just not the right fit for your flavor, for your culture. And that's great because then what's going to end up happening is you're going to have the right people. Getting the right people on the bus is 90% of your effort in the first probably 3 to 5 years of your church. And getting the wrong people off the bus. Don't worry about seats. Don't worry about where they're sitting on the bus. Just worry about if they're on the bus or not. Because most of the time, people are communicating that they're on the bus, but their actions show otherwise. They're not really on the bus. They are watching you drive the bus, and they're sitting on the sidelines having opinions about the bus, but they're not on your bus. So again, teach the why. Never get bored with the why. And I've heard this, when the why is high, the cost is low. So a lot of times, church planning or building a business, there's a huge cost attached to this. You got to count the cost and then really stop counting. We got to understand that it is a huge weight, a lot of responsibility, and a lot of practical just work to be done. So getting the right people, and then once you're on the bus, still articulating the why, and when the why is high, the cost is low. The counting of the cost are The responsibilities or the late nights or the early mornings don't really feel as harsh as it felt initially. Because why? Fruit and why? If I have conviction in my heart, there's nothing I cannot do. Again, the 3 steps here. People are going to connect with your vision. They're going to care about the vision. Then they're going to have conviction on the vision. They might connect with you. They might connect with the idea of the thing. And then they're going to care about it. They're going to be like, oh, this is really great. And even there's people in your church who attend your church who don't serve. It's because they care about your church. They care about understanding the principles of God and the Bible. But then they have a conviction that this is no longer your church. This is our church. This is my church. When I go home and I talk to my friends about church, I understand my language is full of faith and understanding that that is mine as well. I'm participating in it. So again, when the why is high, the cost is low. Number 3, no gap between what we preach and what we practice. Live the culture. You want to have a giving church? Be generous. You want to have a positive church? Be positive. If you want to have a passionate worship, be passionate in worship in the front row. If you want passionate preaching, understand that right preaching comes from right living. And most of the time, by the way, everything follows the leader. Everything rises and falls on leadership, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So there should be no gap between what is preached and what is practiced. And that's not just Sunday messages, by the way. That's a Slack message. That's a text message. That's an email. That's a host moment. That's what the worship leader is saying in worship. That's what the welcome team is saying outside, because they're preaching a message. But are they practicing it? Are they practicing generosity? Are they practicing hospitality? When there's no gap, what ends up happening is an excellent, excellent environment. The culture should be visible in every aspect. From the budget to personal interactions, leaders must be dedicated to maintaining alignment. We gotta maintain this lack of boundary here with private and public. You should be the same person publicly as you are privately. Very much so, there should be no gap between what's practiced and what's preached. Most of the time, when you pinpoint back to the gaps in your leadership, what you're seeing is that gap is now in your team. Eventually, it's going to be in your church. And eventually, if you have actual influence, it'll be in the neighborhood or city you are in. So again, there's a huge weight and cost to this. Nobody ever said it would be easy. Actually, it's impossible. It's literally impossible. Hence the point why we need a savior, why we have grace, and why we understand, man, if there is a gap here, I need to have self-awareness and accountability to understand that, one, this is not built on me. Number one, literally our number 1 point today was kingdom, not me. I'm not the king. I'm just as much as a servant as everybody else. Also, you're not a brand. You're a servant. You're not a brand. You are not the poster child. Jesus is the brand. Jesus is the point. Jesus is everything that embodies Scripture. Jesus is the whole point of this whole thing. So again, if you think you are, that's probably the problem here. But again, there should be no gap between what we preach and what we practice. Number 4, we don't need to just raise staff. We need to raise sons, leaders who embody this mission. Hiring staff is not enough. You must raise sons and daughters who embody the church's culture and kingdom principles. This includes confronting issues out of love, ensuring that there's no division, and fostering a culture of honor and service. So let's go through those 4 or 5 different topics here. Love. Everything we do is out of love. Confrontation, if it's not out of love for somebody else, it's really not a great thing. We need to be people who confront people out of, I love you so much and I love the future version of you. Again, ensuring there's no division. We cannot have a actual clarifying mission and vision, and also God's blessing with division. Where there is unity, God commands a blessing. He doesn't recommend a blessing. He doesn't pray about a blessing. God commands it. And when God commands something, we understand that that's huge. And we don't force unity for God's blessing, by the way. We understand, though, that healthy unity creates God's blessing. So again, we don't want division, and we also need to foster a culture of honor and service. We need to honor up, honor down, and honor all around. If you just have to honor up, that's not honor. That's slavery. That is not honor if it just is honored up. If your leader doesn't honor you down, I'm telling you that is not a healthy environment. You need to honor up, you need to honor down, you need to honor all around. And service. Why don't we just model what it looks like to be servants? Man, I'm going to get there. I'm going to be the first person there. I'm going to be the last person to leave. I'm going to be all in. I'm going to sweat, load in, and load out. I'm going to do my best to serve the house. And again, we're not raising staff here. We're raising sons and daughters of Jesus. This should not be a staff conversation. I want to be on staff someday. I want to get paid. None of that is bad, by the way. All that stuff is fine, but understand, yeah, sure, you're hiring staff, but you're raising and leading sons and daughters. Sons and daughters of Jesus, but also sons and daughters of real people who have real lives, real stories, real pains, real hurts, habits, and hangups, real positive interactions, and all that stuff. All that to say, you got to understand that you're dealing with real people. This is not a robot system. AI can't take and replace the church. It is real human beings with real problems, with real positive interactions, with real strengths. And it's your responsibility to push them, to help them grow, not to be more like you, but to be more like Jesus. Last 2 points here: define, communicate, and align. Culture lives in clarity. If you can't say it in simple terms in one sentence, you don't know it enough. It's not in your heart. Define the culture clearly so everyone knows what it's like and what it feels like. You should be able to explain the feeling of something, the heart, the conviction side of it, to set timelines, provide feedback, and ensure that culture carries understand the role. Culture carriers need to know their role. If you're on our team, you're carrying culture, because this is why. Why do I need to carry culture? Why do I need to show up on time? Why do I need to have a smile on my face? Why do I need to have my heart engaged in the service? And again, the 2 words here are transparency and consistency, and communication are vital. So you want to be an influential leader in your context, in your church, and you're struggling to get leaders to serve in youth. Ask yourself, am I being transparent and am I being consistent? And if you're being both of those and people are still not saying yes to the vision, I would go back to the drawing board of the vision. Is the vision big enough for people to fit their dreams and goals in? The problem with consumerism, church, is we go, here's the 8 teams you can serve on, pick one and serve on it, rather than taking time to get coffee or a phone call to help understand God's design for this person, and you as the pastor recommending a team for them or recommending a small group for them. Because when that happens, what ends up happening is they go, oh, it's about the big picture, but it's also about me making a difference and making my difference. And when you can be transparent about the vision and you can be consistent with communicating the culture and also just being a consistent person, you're going to have more integrity. People are going to trust you more. People are going to be bought into you more. So again, you need to be able to define culture, make basic 1 to 2 sentence definitions for each character and culture trait you have. Communicate it and communicate it often, and make sure there's alignment on this. Hey, is there any tension here? Do you have any gaps? Do you have any questions? Do you have any feedback? Do you feel any discernment on this? And giving space to have a conversation around it. And again, some of this stuff, fluid, right? They're culture identity statements that we absolutely will not refuse to budge on. And there are also just minor things that maybe are a part of our culture that really aren't that big of a deal. For instance, planning center. Some churches plan a month in advance. Some churches do week to week. In our context, we lead 200 plus volunteers. So when you have volunteers who are not a part of your staff, chasing them down week to week is not the best use of our time. It's not the best use of my time. The best use of my time is to plan a month out to create space for us to think about the next month, to think about the next 3 months, so that we create margin. Because in my opinion, the best leaders are developed in margin. The best leaders are developed at the dinner table or going out to dinner with your team and be able to just have fun together and dream together. None of that happens, though, if you don't define it, you don't have alignment on it, and you don't communicate it often. Last one here, healthy leaders create strong vision. Keep culture front and center. Constantly talk about vision and culture, ensuring there's no room for misalignment. The best gift a leader can give their team is a healthy version of themselves. You are free from unspoken issues and fully committed to the culture. Okay. Healthy leaders create strong vision. You want to have an incredible team. You want to have a really great church. You want to be able to push forward kingdom of darkness and insert the kingdom of light. Constantly talk about vision and culture and be a healthy person. Be a healthy person. Go to counseling. Go to therapy. Go to church without preaching. Be there. Be in the presence of God. Be in prayer. Read your Bible. Have friends that are you are holding yourself accountable to. Because again, the best gift you can give your team is the healthy version of yourself. And that's just not for church, by the way. I've led in the business space for a long time now. And the best gift I can give any team that I've led, any business that I've built, is the healthy version of myself, which means let your yes be yes and your no be no. And people need to respect that just as much as you. If you're a servant leader at your church, your pastor or whoever is your leader needs to respect your yes and needs to respect your no. And just because you say no to something doesn't mean that you're a bad person, you're a bad leader, you're letting people down. Really what you're doing is you're creating space for you to be healthy, which then in a weird way actually makes our church better, makes our team better. So again, healthy leaders create strong visions. A strong vision, by the way, isn't the statement on the wall. The strong vision is, man, if you can put your whole team in a room, we all close our eyes for 5 minutes and we all imagine what in 5 years we're doing. If that whole room isn't thinking about the same thing, there's misalignment. Because again, they should have space. They should have margin. They should understand where the ceiling is in their leadership right now and how we're going to break through that ceiling just as much as you as well. They need to understand where their gaps are and how us working through those gaps creates opportunity for other people to rise up as leaders. Everything rises and falls on leadership, like I said before. The best gift, listen to me, on this podcast episode, I don't even know, I think it's 105, 106. The best gift you can give your team, pastor, is the healthy version of yourself. You're doing too much. You're not delegating. You think that you doing it and letting other people have other things to do is the best thing you can do. The best thing you can do is delegate and empower. There's always somebody who wants more, who's hungry for more, and you don't need to do everything. You need to do the things that God has designed you to do, and everything else needs to be delegated and empowered for people not to just do it because you don't want to do it, but empower them. Delegate the good stuff, by the way. Don't just delegate the bad. So I'm going to run through these 6 again. And again, these are just things, intangibles that I believe will help define culture, help you be the best leader you can be. Culture multiplies momentum. You want momentum in your church? You want momentum in your business? Have a culture that's defined. Define it. Every single thing. Think about a whole service flow from load in at 5 a.m. to load out at 8 p.m. Everything in between that should have a definition to it. It should have clarity. And if it doesn't, you're not bringing enough clarity. Teach the why consistency. When the why is high, the cost is low. Maybe your team is complaining. They have a bad spirit. They're not excited about church. They're saying I have to more than I get to. Go back to your why and consistently communicate it. Number 3, no gaps between what we preach and what we practice. We got to be people who are the same publicly and privately. Very much so, yes, on the platform preaching, but also very much just in serving. Number 4, you are raising sons and daughters, not just staff. Number 5, define, communicate, and alignment. Alignment determines assignment. Again, getting the right people on the bus is the responsibility here. Let's not worry about seats. Let's just worry about getting the right people on the bus. And lastly, healthy leaders create strong visions. Leader, the best gift you can give your team is the healthy version of yourself. Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode. If you can, subscribe, comment, leave a review on the podcast. It means the world to me. We'll see you guys next week.